Whether it's the bite, the fight, the fish, or the people we chase them with, fishing is an amazing way to connect to what really matters. From the beginner to the experienced angler, there's always more to do, explore, or try in fishing. This is a chance to discuss and celebrate all of it. This is the Love of Fishing podcast. Welcome to the Love of Fishing podcast, a show dedicated to sharing the love of the sport, discussing and educating all that's fishing, and always having a good time. I'm your host, Lyle Gator. If you're a new viewer or listener to the show, welcome. I appreciate you tuning in because we've got a great show for you this week. This week's guest on the Love of Fishing podcast is Ray Blades. For those of you who don't know, Ray is the editor for Ontario Outdoors magazine. He's an avid steelheader, fly angler, as well as hunter, and I'm really excited to have him on the show this week. I hope you guys are enjoying the show so far. It's been an awesome process to be putting these podcasts out on a weekly basis, and I really appreciate those of you who are tuning in week after week. It's been a great chance to share some good energy and talk about things that we love, stay positive at a time like this, and I just really, really appreciate it. So thank you guys. Without any further ado, let's talk to Ray. This week's guest on the show is Ray Blades. Ray is an avid steelheader, fly angler, and hunter. He's the editor for Ontario Outdoors magazine, and it's an absolute pleasure to have him on the show this week. Welcome to the show, Ray.
Welcome. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I actually had the opportunity to work for Ray this past summer at the magazine. I was an assistant digital editor for the great team there, and it was a blast. I worked there for July and August, and I learned a lot about content, and it's actually part of the inspiration for this podcast. Was getting it going, kind of, being able to interact with people and share our stories about fishing.
Yeah, it was a great having you over the summer. You brought a lot to the team, and I think everybody that worked with you, I'm sure everybody that worked with you, all the feedback we had, they just loved having you part of the team, and it's unfortunate circumstances that you couldn't be a bigger part of the team going forward, but we're very appreciative that you were able to bring a lot to Ontario Outdoors, and not just in content wise, just an outlook, an attitude, and a great perspective and insight into fishing in the province.
Thank you, Ray. So I like to start the show off. I gave you a little bit of foreshadowing earlier about some off-the-wall questions, and I like to destabilize my guests when they come on a little bit. I like to do some icebreaker questions and loosen people up for those who don't know them. I got 3 here. First one is, you have to sing karaoke. What song do you pick?
Well, actually, I have done karaoke before. Which is a little bit scary. Maybe this is bad. I'm thinking probably like Bon Jovi, maybe like Living on a Prayer or something like that.
Okay.
Or maybe I go full out. If you're gonna do karaoke, you may well just do something from Nickelback, because if you're gonna go full out, you may as well just do it all the way, right?
So some Nickelback. Okay.
Yeah. Although I did write about in my editorial column when you did the piece on the Niagara region about my love of Honeymoon Suite. So that would probably be a backup. I guess it all depends on what the repertoire is of the karaoke place, right? Like I might be up there seeing some Willie Nelson or something like that if they don't have a big selection, but right. I'd probably go with either maybe Nickelback, and if they had some good CanCon on there, maybe we'll do some Honeymoon Suite.
I like it. Do you have any hidden talents or interests that might surprise people?
Oh, I can't. Well, we hit karaoke off, and I can't do that. But any talents? No, I used to play the guitar. I used to ride a dirt bike. There's a lot of things like they call them pre-marriage, pre-mortgage, and pre-kids. So Ray Blades of probably like 20 years ago is a little bit different than Ray Blades right now. So I played hockey. I still play hockey. I enjoy playing hockey. Well, obviously not in the last year with COVID, but I've sort of assistant coached my son He's just turning 16 now. So for the last 10 years or plus 10 or 11 years through minor hockey, a lot of time on the ice with him and his teammates, and that's been a lot of fun.
That's
'Cause
awesome.
I played from when I was able to skate up until about 18 or so. So that was fun. I used to play guitar, used to have a dirt bike and ride that. The only other thing is I build bamboo fly fishing rods, so that's kind of my getaway passion, just to kind of de-stress and get back to things and build some rods for the upcoming season. And I tie flies, so of sort of artistic technical talents.
Yep.
Those are probably the two other things.
Can you give me a quick rundown for someone maybe who doesn't know the magazine, how it's structured, what exactly Ontario Outdoors is? Could you give me a quick rundown on exactly where you work and what you do?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm the editor of Ontario Outdoors magazine. We've been around for, you put me on the spot now, is it 50? This is our 50.
He's consulting the magazine.
Yeah, so I'm consulting the magazine. I just want to see issue volume. Our Jan Feb was issue 1, volume 53. So 53 years, and then we're working on our. We just put out our April issue, so that would be the 3rd issue of our 53rd year of being in publication. So we started out as a print magazine. We still are a print magazine, but obviously, nowadays you have to be, and we want it to be a lot more than just that. So we cover all of Ontario, both angling and hunting, with a print magazine, a digital edition, a website with a lot of content on there, a lot of news on there, the major social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even on Pinterest. And we have a YouTube channel where we sort of cross-pollinate some of our content. So a lot of our content is good for the written word, but it's also nice to have photos and illustrations, and by extension, it's fantastic to have sort of some video representation of ideas and concepts that you're kind of trying to get across. So we have a video YouTube channel, which strangely enough, Lyle Gator has a couple videos on that channel too. So
a question that I like to ask everybody is, how did you get into fishing or hunting, the outdoors?
Yeah, the easy answer to that is both my dad and my mother. My mother by extension, probably more so than anything. So my dad, I wouldn't and the funny thing is I wouldn't really call my dad an angler. I mean, he fishes and he took me fishing, but I wouldn't necessarily categorize him as a hardcore angler. He grew up in Toronto. He grew up fishing and actually hunting down through the Don River, right in the shadow of downtown Toronto. Back in the late 30s and through the 40s and 50s, when you could hunt rabbits with a 22 in Toronto, and fish for trout and bass and stuff like that, where they were in the Don River at the time. But when I was born, he always loved getting me outdoors, not just me, but my mom and my sister. And we would spend a lot of either weekends doing day and weekend trips. We would, he wanted to buy a cottage, and then he just didn't want to have another place to kind of take care of and paint and do the lawn and fix plumbing and electricity and stuff like that. So we got a camper van, and we used to, put it somewhere for either part of the season or half a season or a couple of years. So we'd be in the Kawarthas for a summer, and then the next season we'd move over to the Bay of Quinte for another year or two, and then we were up to Parry Sound for a bit, and we traveled around that. So I got to see mostly from Southern Ontario. So that kind of got me into the outdoors and the fishing. Every place we went, whether it's weekend trips or for longer, I always had a fishing rod with me. The reason I guess I probably got it it's just exposure, right? And I try to talk to people in the outdoors about this, and I don't want to preach to anybody. They can do whatever they want and however they want to get into it. But I think for the most part, it's just exposure to the outdoors, and you're your son or daughter or girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever it is you expose to it, they might become anglers or hunters, but they might become bird watchers, or they might become hikers, or they might become, mountain bikers, or they might become arborists or something like that. And I think all that stuff is really cool and really important. Although I classify myself first and foremost as an angler, and a hunter, I love nature. I love paying attention to what birds are around while I'm fishing.
Mm-hmm.
I love to just see different you know moles and mice and foxes and everything while I'm just outside in nature trying to ID trees and the difference between different types of oaks and maples and coniferous and deciduous trees. I think that whole big picture experience is if you're just focused on fishing or hunting, like I said, I'm not trying to tell you how to experience your time in the outdoors, but for me, if it's just fishing and hunting, I think you're missing the bigger picture too, because I just love all the other aspects that come with being outside, and fishing and hunting are just a fantastic reason to be in the outdoors.
I love that, Ray. That's fantastic. I had a funny experience, kind of on that, being a guide and knowing my fish and habitats and things like that. I'd like to say I have a pretty good understanding of what's happening in and around the water. I started landscaping this past fall, which took me far away from the water. It took me
Right.
onto land, and I gotta say, I was doing some weeding, and I looked down and I thought it was an oak tree and it was a maple tree, and I couldn't ID it. And I was looking right at it. So, like you say, the outdoors is big, and depending on your level of exposure at different points in it, it may shape your appreciation for it. And kind of at that moment, I was like, yeah, you know what, nature's huge, and there's a lot to learn. So,
Yeah, it's the great thing I love about it is it's endless, right? There's so many tangents you can take go on it. Like I said, you can go into a real like a nature aspect of it and a biology aspect of it. You can get into lure making and rod making. You can get into boat building. You can get into specializing in Great Lakes trolling, or you can get into specializing into I don't know, jigging for walleye or panfish. I have some
mhm.
friends that are just panfish nuts, and they don't care about anything other than crappie and bluegill and perch and stuff like that. And I
Yeah,
find that thing fantastic, fascinating, right? The list can go on and on and on and on and on of how many different tangents you can get into, just in fishing, not to bring you even hunting into the discussion, but just in fishing in the outdoors. There's so many ways you can specialize, and it's just endless. And I always chuckle when somebody says they're an expert in something, because it's, to me, the beauty in it is you can never be an expert in anything, right? You can obviously have years and years of experience and have a lot of knowledge and have some great insight into things, and learn from people, and provide insight to people. But I don't think anybody could ever truly call themselves an expert in anything, because it just keeps on going and going.
for sure. Do you have any pet peeves when you go fishing, or anything that you see in fishing that you kind of hits you the wrong way?
Um, yeah, again, I don't want to say, like, tell people what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. I think as long as you're out there enjoying yourself, of following the law and the regs, and not only the letter of the rule of the law, but the intent of the law, because there can be a gray line there for some
Hmm.
stuff. uh, Without sounding like a curmudgeon, or like, this is what the kids are doing nowadays, I think
Yeah.
I think maybe you can relate, and not to drag you into the argument, but I have a number of friends that are fishing guides, from across the country, not just in the province, but across the country and across the U.S., and even over in Europe and stuff like that. And one of the concerning trends that I see or have seen over, especially over the last couple of years, and even more so during COVID times is that they have a lot of people that come out, and all they are interested in doing when they're on their boat or wading the river with them, or that is the only, the only kind of seems like the reason that they're there is to get a photo for Instagram.
Yes.
And again, far from me to tell you why you should be fishing. You do come to it and enjoy it from however you want to do it. I just think the experience is lacking. All they're looking for is a trophy fish picture, or even just a good fish picture and something to put on. And it seems the main culprit seems to be Instagram. And I'm not trying to harp on anybody. I have an Instagram account and I post some fish pictures and stuff with that. But
Yeah.
I just think, if the only reason you're out there is for some social media, post, it's just there's so much more to it than that. And again, not to sound like a curmudgeon, but I would even argue, part of the reason I'm out there is not to be connected to social media, is not to be connected to anything else, is not to have a competition with anybody else of who's better or whatever, but it's just to get lost and decompress, right?
With lockdowns in place, restrictions to travel and things like that, I thought I would ask, what are some angling things on your bucket list that you've done or that you'd still like to do?
One of my bucket list things was always to catch a saltwater steelhead and fish out in BC. So a number of years ago, I was able to do that, and I try to get back there as much as I can, because I love fishing for them out there.
Yeah.
I love fishing for them here too. So don't make any mistakes. It's the same and different at the same time. Um,
Hmm.
so I still enjoy Great Lakes fisheries, and we still have some phenomenal fisheries here. Some because of just the realities of what's going on out west, especially in the Pacific Northwest in the U.S. and in the more so in southern British Columbia, but also through central and northern British Columbia. The realities are that a lot of times our steelhead runs in the Great Lakes are better than what's going on out there. So at times, and
Right.
it's just different, right? I don't really think at times they are the same fish, comparing it differently, but just the opportunity to fish out in BC for saltwater steelhead. One of the other things is I got to fish with our senior editor, Gord Ellis, a number of years ago. He's up in Thunder Bay, but he spends a lot of time on Lake Superior in the Nipigon system. So
Okay.
I was able to fish with him on there and get a coaster brook trout.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, actually get a couple of them. So that was always on my bucket list. I love, like I said, grew up stream trout fishing, a lot of times for brown trout, but I love our little native brook trout. And I still get a thrill out of catching, wild brook trout, even if it's like an 8 or 9 incher, just because they're just so beautiful, and for me they just represent our province. It just that I think that as much as say the muskie is for sort of big trophy fishing in our province,
Hmm.
I think the brook trout represents just a different sort of the other side of the coin on that, and being able to catch a few coastal brook trout and some decent sized ones over 20 inches was just a bucket list thing that came true for me, and I'm really happy for that.
That's super cool. My mom always talks a lot of smack when I go brook trout fishing because she says that they're so small and, oh, why would you want to catch a fish like that? But I agree with you. It's the beauty of them and the places that you experience them too. You talked about going the West Coast right now and how there's some struggles with the fishery. Anytime that you go out and fish in those mountains, I don't think you can really leave empty-handed whether you catch a fish or not. That's I had the opportunity to go out there and I didn't steelhead fish, but we fished some smaller lakes for pike, and just being up in the mountains like that was really cool.
Yeah, coming from Southern Ontario, my neck hurts after being out there because I spend most of my time with just like looking up and around all the time. I'm hardly even looking at the water. I'm
Yeah.
just looking at the mountains, like you said, and eagles, and we've ran across, you know, bears and moose and all sorts of stuff. So there's always something keeping you on your toes. That's one of the big differences. That if you're fishing down some of those rivers there, I'm always like every minute or two looking over my shoulder to make sure that you're still top of the food chain wherever you are, because you're not always top of the food chain wherever you are.
It's so true.
When you're fishing like the Credit River or something like here, you're always looking over your shoulder to make sure that somebody's not going to jump your spot or that. But over there, you're making sure there's no grizzlies or cougars coming down the run behind you.
For sure. Ray, that's all the questions I have for today. I'd like to thank you for coming out to the Love of Fishing podcast and taking time out of your busy schedule. It's been great to talk to you, and I hope that we can do it another time.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. On the bucket list thing, I want to wrap up with this one because I get to put you on the spot right now. If you get to put me on the spot asking about sandwiches and karaoke, I get to put you on the spot. So one of my last, it's definitely not my last bucket list thing to do, but one of the things that's still on the list here. I've caught, again, being a river rat and growing up in Southern Ontario and fishing a lot of the Great Lakes tribs, I've caught a lot of Chinook salmon on a fly rod, more than I probably care to even admit. But I think they were, no disrespect to them, but by the time usually they get in the river, they're pretty brown and dying depending on when you get them, and even if you get them early. One of the things I've learned about fishing throughout the world, I understood and felt that I had a lot of confidence fighting big fish in a river, simply because I've caught so many Chinook salmon in rivers, since I was, I don't know how old, 8, 10, 12 years old onwards up. And this is not anything trying to toot my horn. I mean, if you've spent any time on rivers in Southern Ontario, from, like I said, like Lake Huron, Georgian Bay, Lake Ontario, and that you've probably caught a fair amount of Chinook salmon just because they're so prolific, especially in, anywhere from late August through September and into October.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize, and it was a pretty good awakening for me to talk to people from around the world, from Norway and Britain and even the east coast of Canada and central Canada, that have never cooked a fish that's over 10 or 12 pounds and with any regularity. And the one thing I love about Chinook fishing in rivers is that they give you so much confidence in fishing for and fighting big fish in rivers, and understanding what your options are to try and land them, and they give you a level of experience. But to get back to the bucket list thing, one thing I have never done is caught a Chinook salmon on a fly rod in Lake Ontario. So I think there's a good guy that knows a lot about salmon fishing in around the Niagara region. He has a guide service and a podcast, and I know I might have to have a talk with him and see if he can maybe put me into something like that. Maybe the lower Niagara River, or sometime in the spring on some of those spots that he has marked on his GPS. So see how that goes.
I may know a guy, and I think he'd be willing. Sure. They're very special, and I haven't explored fly fishing too much, but we do the light tackle thing in the fall and in the winter, and like you said, the experience of fighting those big fish is pretty special. So it would make my day for sure to see you hook up with a fly rod with one of them. Yeah. That would be pretty cool.
I'd love to get on the water with you to do that. So hopefully we can make that happen in 2021.
Yeah. Ray, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lyle. I had a really great time.
I'd like to thank Ray once again for stopping by the Love of Fishing podcast and taking the time. He's a very, very busy guy. He's got a lot on the go, a lot of really cool stuff happening at the magazine. So if you guys aren't familiar, I definitely recommend checking them out. This week's episode of the Love of Fishing podcast has actually been sponsored by Ontario Out of Doors. Ray and the whole team there have been very generous in sponsoring the show with a year subscription to the magazine. So thanks so much, Ray and the whole team there at the magazine. If you want a chance to be the lucky winner of this subscription, all you have to do is be subscribed to my channel and drop a comment below. This week I'm looking for a comment of what your favorite Love of Fishing podcast episode was from the first season. So I do have plans to do a season 2. I want to say just one more time, thank you to those who followed the show. I have a new Instagram page up just for the show so that I can keep things separate. Things that are podcast related can go there. If you look it up on Instagram, it's the Love of Fishing Podcast. So check that out. Thanks, guys, for tuning in and listening. It's that time of the show where I like to go over this week's tip of the week. This week's tip of the week is to always have a multimeter on your boat. And if you have a boat, if you're fishing from shore, it's probably not going to apply to you. But basically what it is it's a little box that tells you how much power your batteries are putting out. So it's a good way to check connections, check your batteries, and familiarizing yourself with some simple electrical principles and how batteries work, how those systems on your boat work, can really save you a lot of time and a lot of money. I've spent a lot of time on my boat re-rigging wires. Any kind of installs and stuff I try and do myself because I know that they're going to be done right if I do them. And I'm very lucky to also have a couple of electrician friends that have taught me what I know now and have really helped me out a lot. So that's this week's tip of the week. Pick up a multimeter. Now it's the time of the week where I share the results from this week's poll. This week's poll, I asked, do you fish cowbells? And for those of you who've been salmon fishing or Great Lakes fishing for a while, you've probably heard of people using cowbells. They're basically a gang troll. It's like 3 spinning plastic or metal blades that rotate around, and you can put different baits behind them. You can fish spoons behind them. You can fish small crankbaits. You can fish spin and glows. I really like to put spin and glow behind my cowbells, and they're a lake trout technique. So I do quite a bit of lake trout fishing, and we're really lucky in Niagara to have some of the biggest and best lake trout fishing on all of Lake Ontario due to the structure that we have nearby, due to a lot of different factors. So I spend a lot of time lake trout fishing, and just this past week when I was out on a trip, bite slowed down a little bit for us. I put on some cowbells, and bang, the bite was back up. So cowbells are really good. I like fishing them for lake trout. I've caught some of my biggest lake trout on cowbells, and I was just interested to see if anyone else fishes them, if they like them, if they don't like them. So the results were in favor of people not fishing cowbells. 27 said no, 24 said yes. So if you're looking for a new presentation, if you like lake trout fishing, give cowbells a try. There's lots of different makes of them. Northern King makes one. I know there's a lot of homemade ones. They're pretty simple. If you look them up, you'll get the idea. So that's this week's poll. For those of you who've watched the show before, you know that I like to finish off the week with sharing a positive message. And that's by design, to give everybody some good vibes, some good energy for the week upcoming. Unfortunately, this is the last Love of Fishing podcast episode for a while. I'm not too sure when season 2 is going to happen, but if you stay tuned, it'll probably be next winter when I have a little bit more time. Things are getting pretty crazy with the guiding. If you do want to get out with me anytime, send me a text. My number's 905-932-7024. I'll put my links to my Facebook and my Instagram pages down below. I want to thank those of you who've watched the show, listened to the show this winter. It's been awesome to put this show together, and all the comments and the connections that I made through this have been awesome. So thank you guys for tuning in. This week's positive message is another Ben Franklin message, and I've just been loving some of the old Ben stuff. This week's message is, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. I've remembered this quote for a long time, and it's really awesome. And I think that when we think about taking kids fishing, getting new people into fishing, this is a super important thing to remember. Fishing is an experience. It's everything coming together, and it is something that you have to do in order to truly learn. So if you're just getting into fishing, if you want to get someone else into fishing, spend some time, go fishing with them. You never know how it might change them, how it might make their life better. I hope you guys have a great week, a great season, and we'll catch you next time on the Love of Fishing podcast. You probably thought I forgot, but I didn't. Hook sets are free. Get outside and go fishing. Peace.